You're standing in a river. The water reaches your knees. It's warm, brown, thick with silt. And the mud beneath your feet holds the bones of the oldest story ever told. Not a myth. Not yet. Right now, it's just a plain, a flat stretch of earth between two rivers, somewhere in what we now call southern Iraq. The locals had a word for it. They called it edinu. It meant a flat land. Nothing more. A term you'd find scratched into clay tablets next to grain counts and livestock records. A bookkeeper's word. And yet, that single word would grow into the most famous garden in human history. But to see how that happened, we have to go back. Not to the Bible, not to theology, to the dirt. Thousands of years ago, this plain stretched as far as you could walk in any direction. Two great rivers fed it, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Every spring, snowmelt from the northern mountains surged down. The rivers swelled. They spilled over their banks. They left behind a thin layer of rich silt. And in that silt, everything grew. Date palms, tamarisk, barley. Life erupted from the mud, the way light erupts from a crack in a door. Now here's what most people get wrong. They picture Eden as a jungle, dense canopy, lush vines, parrots. The paintings from the Renaissance burned that image into our brains. But the real landscape was nothing like that. This was dry, cracked earth for most of the year, barely enough rain to fill a coffee mug if you held it out all year. What made the plain fertile wasn't the sky. It was the rivers, the floods, the timing. And that timing mattered more than anyone gives it credit for. Think about it this way. You don't have a clock. You don't have a calendar. You can't check your phone. How do you know when to plant? When to harvest? When the floods will come and when they'll pull back? You watch the water. The rivers become your calendar. When the Tigris swells in early spring, that's your signal. When the smaller streams in the east fill up weeks later, that's your second-hand ticking. The four rivers named in Genesis aren't just a list. They're a schedule, a way of reading the year through moving water. The Tigris and the Euphrates still flow today. The other two, the Pishon and the Gihon, vanished. For centuries, scholars dismissed them as fiction. Then someone looked harder. A survey using laser scanning from the air found a buried riverbed in western Iran. Old, dried up, hidden under layers of dust and sand. Its path matched descriptions of the Pishon so closely that researchers paused. This wasn't a myth channel. It was a ghost. A real watercourse that once carried seasonal flow, swelling during spring and drying by summer. It was much smaller than the Tigris or the Euphrates, but it was real, and it fit. So the question shifts. If Eden's rivers were real, what about Eden's garden? Here's where it gets strange. Because the idea of a walled garden with sacred trees didn't start with the Bible. It started with seals, tiny stone cylinders carved with scenes, rolled across wet clay to leave a mark. Thousands of years before Genesis was written, people in the city of Ur were carving garden scenes onto these seals. Walled orchards, rows of date palms, figures standing among the trees, sometimes receiving fruit, sometimes guarding it. These weren't rare finds. They showed up again and again. They weren't decorations. They were statements. Owning a garden was power. Controlling food was divine. And this is where the leap happened. Somewhere between the mud brick walls of Sumerian temples and the scrolls of Hebrew scribes, a human-built garden became a divine one. The walls came down. The gardener became God. The orchard became paradise. A place you built became a place that was given to you. And that changes everything about what it means to lose it. But we're not at the loss yet. We're still in the garden, and in the center of it stand two trees. You've heard their names: the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Most people think of them as plants, tall, leafy, bearing fruit you can bite into. And on the surface, that's how Genesis describes them. But look closer. These trees don't behave like trees. They work like switches. Touch one, and you live forever. Touch the other, and you see the world as it truly is. That's not botany. That's a circuit, a branching network of choice and result. Picture a canopy where every fork in every branch is a question. Left or right, yes or no, obey or reach. and at the tip of each branch, a pulse of light, like a nerve firing. These trees aren't rooted in soil. They're rooted in the oldest question humans ever asked. What happens if I choose? The manuscripts don't even agree on which tree matters more. Across dozens of ancient copies, different readings shift the order, swap the names, change which tree gets the spotlight. One tradition says life came first. Another says knowledge did. The Greek translation adds verses that don't exist in the Hebrew, filling in details about what the trees actually do. This isn't a fixed story. It's a living argument. Scribes fought over these trees for centuries because the stakes were everything. What does it mean to know? What does it cost to live forever? And standing right beside those trees, something waited, something that spoke. Now, if you grew up in any Western tradition, you know the serpent as evil, the devil in disguise, the villain. But that reading came much later. In the original text, the serpent is called cunning, clever, not wicked. And in the broader world of ancient art, the serpent wasn't a villain at all. In tablets found at Tel El Amarna in Egypt, the serpent was often linked to a water god, a source of wisdom, not ruin. The serpent knew things. It carried knowledge the way rivers carry silt, silently, from unseen places. So imagine this. The serpent doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It speaks the way smoke moves, slow, curling, wrapping around you before you even notice. Its words don't break the rule. They bend it. They ask a question. Did God really say you couldn't eat from any tree? That's not a command. It's an invite to doubt. And doubt, once it enters, doesn't leave. Between the serpent's mouth and the tree stands something you can't see. Call it a boundary, a membrane, thin as breath. You know it's there because someone told you not to cross it. Every parent has built one of these. Every child has felt it. The moment before you touch what you were told not to touch, the air itself seems to hum. And then the membrane breaks. What follows is the part everyone remembers. The fruit, the bite, the sudden shame, the hiding. The voice in the garden asking, "Browse, where are you?" But what most retellings skip is what comes after the exile. Because the story doesn't end when the gate slams shut. It begins, out beyond the garden, with no more perfect soil, no more rivers that water themselves, no more fruit that falls into your hands. Humanity does something remarkable. It invents. The very next chapters of Genesis list the first farmer, the first builder, the first metal worker. These aren't just names, they're markers. The text is telling you, in plain terms, that culture is born from loss. You don't invent the plow because life is easy. You invent it because the ground won't yield on its own anymore. You don't forge bronze because you're bored. You forge it because you need an edge. And this pattern isn't unique to the Bible. That's what makes it eerie. When researchers surveyed traditions from across the world, most of them carried a version of the same story. A garden, a rule, a breach, an exile, and then creation. In West Africa, in East Asia, even in places with no contact with the ancient Near East, the same arc appears. A paradise given, a line crossed, a world built from the rubble of what was lost. Why? Why does this story keep showing up? Maybe because it's not about a garden at all. Maybe it's about the moment every human being faces when they realize the world doesn't give you anything for free. The moment you understand that knowing more means carrying more. That growth and grief are not opposites. They're the same thing, seen from different angles. But here's where the common reading falls short. If you treat Eden only as a moral tale, a warning about not following the rules, you miss half the story. Because the people who wrote it weren't just priests. They were engineers. They lived on a floodplain. They tracked rivers. They measured silt. They built canals that turned a dry plain into the breadbasket of an empire. When they wrote about a garden with 4 rivers flowing from a single spring, they weren't dreaming. They were drawing from what they knew. The sacred and the hands-on were the same thing. God's order and the flood schedule were written in the same language. Pull the theology away and you find the study of water. Pull the water away and you find theology. They can't be split apart. That's the point. For the people of that plain, the divine wasn't floating above the clouds. It was in the timing of the water, in the silt that arrived each spring, in the choice to plant or to wait. And that changes what exile means. Because if Eden is both a spiritual state and a real place, then leaving it isn't just a punishment. It's a graduation. You step out of a world where everything is handed to you, and you enter a world where you must provide for yourself. That's not just Genesis. That's every human life. If this story took root in you, if you felt the mud between your toes and the hum of that invisible line, then the next story in this series will pull you even deeper. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The plain is still there. The rivers still run, though thinner now. And somewhere beneath the dust, a buried channel waits, carrying the memory of water that once fed the world's first garden.